Brachos, Dafim Samach Gimel and Samach Daled, and Shabbos, Dafim Beis through Vav. Brachos on Daf Samach Gimel, the Gemara brings a story that Chanina ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua went into the diaspora. He was Ma'aber Shanim Merkavei Chadashim. He was doing calendrical things, leap years, and determining when the months begin in Chutz La'aretz. So the Gemara says that the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael were upset. They said, you can't do that, we're upset at you because Ata Ma'aber Shanim Merkavei Chadashim Chutz La'aretz, and it has to be only in Eretz Yisrael. He said, Rabbi Kiva did it. Rabbi Kiva did it also. So they said, Rabbi Kiva was Lo Nech K'mosho B'Eretz Yisrael. There was nobody like him in Eretz Yisrael, so he had a dispensation to do it in Chutz La'aretz. He said, I too, nobody's like me in Eretz Yisrael. They said, no, maybe once that was true, but now there are people like you in Eretz Yisrael. This is la halacha. We can't establish the calendar, we can't set the calendar in Chutz La'aretz. Rambam in Sefer Mitzvahs says this applies not just when they would do the Kiddush HaChodesh via Riyah. This applies even the cheshbon, the calculations that we use today. Even the calendar that we use today cannot be established by Chachamim in Chutz La'aretz. Even the set calendar that we used, it had to have been originally established by the Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael. The heter to do it in Chutz La'aretz is only b'dochek when there aren't Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael. Other than that, it must be done in Eretz Yisrael. In the 10th century, there was the year 922, the year Dalet Alafim Tafresh Pei Beis, 682, the year 922 of the Common Era. There was a great debate between Rav Sadia Gaon, the leader of the Chacham in Bavel, and Rabbi Aaron ben Meir HaKohen, a Chacham in Eretz Yisrael, about what year, in that year when Rosh Hashanah should be. There were some technical disagreements about how to establish the calendar. For a year or two, it was a terrible machlokes. For a year or two, the Jews in Eretz Yisrael were celebrating different holidays than the Jews in Bavel. Eventually, Rav Sadia's Shita won, and today, universally, the Shita of Rav Sadia about how the calendar is now fixed. We follow the rules that were finally set down in their current form by Rav Sadia. The question is why. Scholars ask why. If the rule is that Eretz Yisrael, the Chacham have precedence, why? And that was apparently one of Rabbi Aaron ben Meir's arguments, that I'm from Eretz Yisrael. I have the hegemony of the calendar. So people have said different reasons for why Rav Sadia won, but Kipshuta, one can argue perhaps that they weren't making the calendar. The calendar had been established centuries earlier. They were arguing about certain details. There is some question about the calendar that we used, established by centuries earlier by Amoraim. Did they put it in its final form? Did it continue to evolve? But in any event, we can argue that in the time in 922 of the Common Era, the time of Rav Sadia, they were no longer making new rules. They were simply arguing about what the rules had been, and therefore it was just machlokus of interpretation. So it wasn't a question of who has the right to make the rules. It was a question of how to interpret the rules, and there we can follow the Chachmei Bavel against those of Eretz Yisrael. Alternatively, perhaps one can argue that Rabbi Aaron ben Meir was not on the level of Rav Sadia. Rav Sadia was the equivalent of Lo Haniach Kamoso B'Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara says a rule that Chacham Shatimei, at the end of the story, the Gemara talks about how he paskined things and they disagreed with him. The people from Eretz Yisrael disagreed with him, so the Gemara brings a rule that in general, except for this case, which was different, in general, Chacham Shatimei Ein Chaver Rashai L'Tar. If one Chacham rules Tamei, another Chacham is not permitted to rule Tar. Similarly, if one Chacham prohibits, Ein Chaver Rashai L'Hatir, another Chacham cannot permit what he has prohibited. Why not? So, various explanations for this are given. Some say it's a question of respect for the first Chacham, not call him out as having issued an erroneous ruling. Some say it's like a Chil Hashem. It looks like there are two Torahs. Torah no longer looks unified. Some say it's a different din entirely, nothing to do with kavod, but it's nothing to do with respect. It's an idea that when the Chacham rules prohibiting something, that thing becomes a chaticha d'yisura. He actually has the power by his psak to render it asur, so it can no longer become mutter. Whatever the reason is, that's the din. This is a halacha we accept in Shulchan Aruch. This is accepted halacha. There are, however, a number of exceptions, some of which are the subject of dispute. The Ramah brings these halachas, and Mechaber seems to omit them. The Ramah brings the halacha with all the debate about it. The Ramah says the second Chacham cannot be matir based on shikul adas, based on his own opinion. However, if he has a Kabbalah, if he has a received tradition that the halacha is different, he's allowed to disagree with the first Chacham. Or certainly if it's Ta'ah B'Dvar Mishnah, if he can show that the first Chacham missed an explicit Mishnah or an explicit authoritative source, then he can disagree with the first Chacham. Shach agrees on Tov B'Dvar Mishnah, but he disagrees on Yesh Lo Kabbalah, just because he has a received tradition. If it's not based on an authoritative source, the Shach at some length argues that other Rishonim disagree and say that there's no. Some Rishonim say that he says, other Rishonim disagree, and the Shach's inclination is that it doesn't matter unless you can show a Dvar Mishnah, you can't overturn an original Chacham who answered neither based on your own opinion nor based on your received tradition. So Ramah goes on that even if you can't disagree with the first Chacham, you can debate the matter with him and try to convince him to retract his ruling, and that's why the questioner is allowed to go to a second Rav. We talk about posek shopping, but in terms of this halacha, at least, the questioner is allowed to ask for a second opinion. He has to tell the Chacham that someone else already said it was Aser, and the second Chacham, therefore, will not just say it's mutter. At best, he'll go talk to the first Chacham and say, did you fully consider these arguments, and would you consider changing your mind? Also, the Ramah brings that this is only a specific hora in a specific case, a specific chaticha, a specific maisa, a specific thing. However, a new question that came up, even if it hinges logically on the same issue, then it's pashut. The Ramah says, brings from the Marik, it's another poskin, it's pashut that the second chacham is allowed to disagree if we're no longer referring to the actual same situation. There's also a debate among the poskin whether this applies only to a chacham who's of the same caliber as the first chacham, or even to a greater chacham. Some poskim say, the Shach brings that, some poskim say, the Marik, of course, it's only chavero, a colleague, someone on the same level can't disagree, but someone who's greater can disagree. On the other hand, the Ramah says other poskim said that even if he's greater, you're not allowed to dissent from an earlier opinion. So that's also machlokes at poskim. Daf Shamach Daled, the Gemara brings the last quarter daf in Brachos. The Gemara brings hayotzim beis haknesses, someone who leaves shul after davening and then goes to the Beis Midrash, which is the place they used to learn, and he studies Torah. He has tremendous merit. Zocha makabel pnei Shechina, he receives the Shechina, the divine presence. So when the Torah brings this halacha, the Torah brings this in Orach Chaim after Hilchos Tefillah. He says that a person should study Torah and he should be kavei itim l'Torah. He should have a fixed and set time to learn Torah, and that should be rigid. He shouldn't deviate from that fixed time to study, even if there's a chance to make great profit. However, he can eat breakfast first, he says, but the idea of being kavei itim l'Torah comes from a Gemara and Shabbos, but this is brought by the Torah, and the Shulchan Aruch as something you should do immediately after davening Shachris. That's how the Shulchan Aruch brings it. Achar sheitim beis haknesses, yelech l'beis midrash, v'yikveh eis lomod. That should be a set time to study, and that time should be kavua. You shouldn't miss it, even if there's an opportunity to make a great deal of money. So the Mishnah Berurah explains that this idea, the language of the Gemara, that they used to go from beis haknesses to beis midrash, is the way they used to organize their society, that they had separate places for studying and for praying. We typically study and pray in the same building. However, the same thing applies, that a person should immediately after davening should go learn. He shouldn't do other things first. Why not? If the Gemara just says if it's important to be kavei itim l'Torah, but why is it so important that to do it immediately after davening? So first of all, you have what the Gemara says, that it's a great thing to do because yelchu mechayil al chayil, that it's good to have a kavei itim b'Torah, to have a set time to learn any time of the day, but it's especially good to go straight from one mitzvah of davening to the other mitzvah of studying Torah. Also, pragmatically, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Pri Megadim both these reasons, that if a person first goes to work and then has his kavei itim l'Torah later, he first takes care of his own affairs, maybe he'll get busy with his own things and he won't wind up learning. He won't have a chance. So it's better to make sure you learn before you do all the other things. Today, we have jobs. It's probably more common, people who have set times to learn, probably more common to do so either before Shacharis or in the evening. But the Mishnah Berurah brings, the Pri Megadim, based on this Gemara, that there's an ideal, if possible, one should have a set time to learn. Some people do that, at least a short share. Some people do that immediately after davening. Shabbos, first couple of dafim in Shabbos, ironically, even though Hilchos Shabbos is one of the most complex and most important and most practical areas of halacha, the first several dafim of Shabbos contain a great deal of material which is intricate, having to do with understanding the Mishnayos, understanding many questions of Chiyuv Chatas and Yisurim Drabanan, but they aren't as practical as many other areas of Shas and many other areas of Masechah Shabbos itself. We'll pick out a few of the particularly significant aspects of the Gemara and the comments of the Rishonim on the first couple of dafim. On Daf Beis and Gimel, the very first mission of the Masechta talks about different types of hotzah, someone standing inside, giving something to someone standing outside, the balabayis and the ani, all kinds of permutations and cases where it's Hotzah Daraisa, it's Hotzah Drabanan, it's Hotzah, and you're not Chay, and it's mutter entirely. So, in particular, the Gemara on Daf Gimel, the Gemara says, the first line of Daf Gimel, Bava Dereisha Patur Mutter. In a case where one person did the entire Hotzah, the Balabayas took something from inside, stuck his hand outside and put it in the Ani's hand, or the Ani took something from outside and put his hand inside and put it on the Balabayas' hand. One person did the entire Hotzah, the entire carrying, the Akira, the picking, the removing it from one place, the Hanacha, the putting it down somewhere else. He did everything. He did a Hotzah Daraisa, he's Chayav Chatas, and the other person is Patur Mutter. He didn't do anything. Akira without a Hanacha, less than a share of Dalad Amos in a Rishus Harabim would be Drabanan. You don't do anything. You don't do any Hotzah at all. That, the Gemara says, is Patur and Mutter. Tosfos asks, really, Patur and Mutter? What happened to the prohibition of Lifnei Ivra L'Sitin Michshel? You're not allowed to facilitate the performance of an Avera? And Tosfos says, even though the Gemara gives an important qualification, the Gemara says that any time the person could have done the Avera without you, any time it's not Betrei Avrei Denara, he's not on the opposite side of the river where he can't reach the item of the Avera, he's on the same side, he can do it himself, you just make it easier for him, that's not Lifnei Ivra, you're not over the Avera of Lifnei Ivra. Tosfos says there's still an Isser. There's still an Isser called Masiyeh L'Idei over Avera. Tosfos proves it from the fact that you can't even facilitate a minor doing an Avera. Not only can't you facilitate it, you have to mafresh him from the Isser. That's Machlokes, but that's what Tosfos says. That there's a Chiyuv Lafrushe, and there's an Isser Masiyeh L'Idei over Avera. That Isser is Drabanan, but it's still an Isser of you can't even help someone do an Avera, even if he doesn't need you to commit the Avera. So Tosfos has a pshat in how the Mishnah can be talking about a case where there is absolutely no Isser at all, not even Masiyeh B'Dei Avera. But Tosfos says there is such an Isser, even if it's not Trei Avrei Denara, even if he can do the Isser himself, there's still a rabbinic prohibition of Masiyeh B'Dei Avera. This is a very heavily discussed Chumrah of Tosfos. This has tremendous ramifications. Giving somebody food, you won't make a brach on it, you won't wash Tfilas Yadayim, and Hilchos Shabbos itself. Invite somebody to your house. He may drive. He can drive anyway. It's not Trei Avrei Denara, but it's Masiyeh B'Dei Avera perhaps. And many different cases on Shabbos: selling property to somebody, renting property to someone, joining an enterprise which enables somebody, which causes someone to be more likely to do Chilul Shabbos, even if he doesn't need you to do the Avera. It's not Trei Avrei Denara, but you're getting into a very serious question of Masiyeh B'Dei Avera. Post can talk about going to a doctor, even if the treatment itself is mutter. Treatment doesn't involve Malacha Daraisa, or the treatment is mutter. It's a drabanan for a chola, but he might do, if the doctor is not observant, he might do other malachas for no reason. So even if there's no lifnei iver, but there's no legitimate reason, even if there's no lifnei iver, but there can still be an isser or Masiyeh B'Dei Avera. So first of all, Post can point out it's not clear that all Rishonim agree with this isser. There are shitos in the Rishonim that say that if he can do the isser anyway, then it's mutter to facilitate the isser, mutter entirely. There is no isser. We generally do assume that there is a prohibition Masiyeh B'Dei Avera, at least Midrabanan, but the poskim have various ways of circumscribing it, various kulos. One prominent shita is that of the Ksav Sofer and other achronim, that Masiyeh only applies, Masiyeh, not necessarily Lifnei Iver, but Masiyeh only applies if the siyuah, the assistance you're providing, is at the moment of the Avera itself. If it's prior to the Avera, if you give him something which later he'll use to do an Avera, an hour or two, that's different. Our case is an Isser Masiyeh, Tosfos says, because you're handing something to the other person who's about to carry it out and do a hotzah, bring it in and do a hotzah. But if it's something that he'll sell him a property, which you think in 2 days he'll use on Shabbos, that already there's more basis for leniency. According to some poskim, there's no Isser Masiyeh B'Dei Avera. The Gemara says that in general we say P'turei de Shabbos are, whenever we use the word Patur, it is Patur from Chatas and Skila, but there's still an Isser to do it. 3 exceptions. One of them is Tzeidas Nachash, trapping a snake, so it shouldn't injure you, is Mutter L'Chatchila on Shabbos. So Tosfos explains, we're not talking about a snake where there's a bona fide issue of Sakanas Nefashos. Of course that's Mutter, that goes without saying. That's not what the Gemara is talking about. The Gemara is talking about Tsar. The snake is going to cause you pain, inflammation, or some kind of suffering. So it's, and that's also mutter. Then that's also mutter. In Isser Daraisa, we're not going to be matir for Tsar to avoid suffering, but Isser Drabanan for various reasons. It could be Drabanan. Tosfos says because of Malacha Shein Tzricha L'Gufa, it could be Drabanan. Some say Malacha Shein Tzricha L'Gufa is Daraisa. There might be other ways of making Yisurim Drabanan. I'll call upon him. According to Tosfos, the yesod of the Gemara is that an Isser Drabanan, when you're Tzeidas Nachash, when trapping the snake is an Isser Drabanan, we can be lenient when there's a question of Tsar. This is brought in this is how the poskim understand this. This is brought as a halacha l'maisa that you can trap animals, different types of vermin, even when it's not pikuach nefesh, provided that it is a malacha drabanan. You can do it because to avoid tsar. Poskim discuss exactly what is considered tsar. So snakes or things that will really cause significant pain are that's tsar. What if something causes psychic pain? It's buzzing and humming and it's very irritating. It's not causing you physical pain. So some poskim are actually machmer. They say that tsar hanefesh is not considered tsar. It has to be physical pain. Other poskim say no, pain is pain. If it bothers you, it bothers you. That can be serious. That can be serious pain as well. This halacha that you can do the Isser Drabanan, the rabbinic prohibition of tzeda to avoid pain, applies to killing also. Shulchan Aruch brings the halacha that you can even step on something like a snake or a scorpion to kill it. It's even if there's no danger, they're not going to kill you. It's still mutter. Now the halacha is you have to do it in a way that people don't realize that you're deliberately killing it. You have to be daresh l'fitumim. You just walk normally and step on it. But even if you know you're going to do it and that's your intention, as long as it doesn't look evident that you're trying to kill it, that's mutter. And the Mishnah Berurah explains because it's only drabanan, because in melacha shein tzricha legufa, which we paskin, many poskim paskin is drabanan, and therefore if they're going to harm you, they're going to cause pain, then an Isser Drabanan we can set aside. We can allow you to do Isser Drabanan again, as long as you don't do it in such a way that will give people the impression that you're just willy-nilly doing Yisurim Drabanan without any justification. However, only when there's real hezek, only when there's real tsar. We mentioned earlier the debate about whether psychic tsar counts. There's also a debate among contemporary poskim whether a wasp that might sting you, is that considered serious tsar? Obviously, if you're anaphylactic and it can cause sakanat nefashos, of course it's mutter. In a case where it'll just hurt, but it won't be any sakana and it won't cause you major injury. Some poskim say that's like a snake. The pain is significant and it's and it's austere. Other poskim say no. It's like flies and gnats, maybe mosquitoes, where the poskim say those are annoying, but that's not significant pain. It's mavur from the poskim that you're not allowed to just kill flies and gnats, even if they're bothering you, even if they might sting you or just bother you in a low grade way. That's the general rule here for minor tsar. We don't allow the violation even of Isuri Drabanan. For major tsar, we do. And poskim debates some of these cases, what's considered minor tsar or major tsar. Gemara talks about a case if you don't do an actual akira in the sense of picking something up, someone puts something on you, loads you up with food or anything else, and then you walk out. Is that hotzah or not? So you just do the walking, you don't do the picking up or putting down. The way the Gemara expresses the question, do we say akiras gufo, moving your body from place to place, is that like akiras chayfetz, like you picked up the chayfetz or not? We paskin chayev. Poskim say hanachas gufo is kanachas chayfetz. The same thing applies when you stop walking. That's as if you actually took the item and set it down, even if you're still holding it. So the poskim bring that if someone is carrying something, someone walks out of his house and he's carrying something, the first thing you should do is don't stop, because as soon as you stop, you will then have completed the hotzah from outside to inside, from inside to outside. Rather, keep going until you figure out a solution. Go back inside in some cases. Halachos are quite complicated. Rabbi Ribiat in his Lamates Halachos brings numerous pages of distinctions. But the first thing is don't stop. Keep walking, because as soon as you stop, even though you didn't actually take the thing and set it on the ground, then you're gonna have a problem of having completed the malacha of hotzah. On Daf Daled, the Gemara talks about a case where somebody put bread in an oven and then Redias Apath, taking it out, is a malacha drabanan. So the Gemara talks about, can you take it out, because if you leave it in and it gets baked, then retroactively you'll have committed an avera that's a malacha daraisa, chiyav chatas or a chiyav misa. Are you allowed to take out the bread, you or somebody else, to avoid the completion of the Isser? If you take it out before it gets baked, no malacha has been done. If you leave it in there, malacha will have been done. So the Gemara says someone else should not take it out, because the rule is, do we tell Ruvain to sin, even a minor sin, the Redias Apath, which is drabanan, in order to prevent Shimon from doing even a major sin? Yeah, if you don't do anything, Shimon will do a major sin. That's on him. You, Ruvain, you're a bystander. You should. It's pashut. Post can point out the Gemara just says it's pashut. The Gemara doesn't bring a proof or anything. The Gemara just says it's self-evident that we don't tell someone uninvolved, to do an avera, even a minor avera, to save someone from doing a more serious avera. So the Gemara says the person himself can take it out to avoid doing a more serious avera. That's how the halach is brought in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah explains, the person himself is allowed to take it out to avoid the more serious avera. Someone else should not do so. Even if the first person was a shogeg, he's still at fault. Even if that person is not around, so we can't tell him to take it out, the other person is still usher, it's usher for him to get involved to save the first person. Even our types of ovens, their ovens, they used to actually stick the breads, like pizzas, probably on the sides of the oven, taking it off what's considered a shvus, a malacha drabanan. Even our ovens, that you're just taking it out of the oven, there's no malacha of redia, even drabanan. There's a different isra involved, the isra of muktzah, the dough is muktzah. However, the Mishnah Berurah says if there's no malacha at all, if it's a pot on the fire, Ruvain put a pot on the fire, and Shimon wants to take it off to help Ruvain, here, Shimon should do that, because there's no malacha at all, there's no daraisa, there's no drabanan. Assuming the contents of the pot are not muktzah, then there's no isra at all, then certainly you should take it off to stop the first person from doing the aver. Tosfos, other Rishonim have various steeros, different gemaras that imply in some cases we do an avera to stop someone from doing a more serious avera. Tosfos has several important distinctions. One distinction he proposes is for a mitzvah rabbah, like Peri Verivia, for a great mitzvah, then we do tell someone to do a minor avera to help someone fulfill a great mitzvah, to avoid being mevatel a great mitzvah. Another distinction is that the only time we tell someone don't do a minor avera, even though he's going to do a major avera, that's when the major avera, it was his fault. He did it b'mezid, or even in the case of shogeg, he was pasheya, he was negligent, and that's how he ended up with the avera. He should have been more careful. But in a case where the first person is not at fault at all, then Tosfos has a possibility that you should do a minor avera to stop him from accidentally, through no fault of his own, committing a great avera. The Beis Yosef brings a tshuvas Rashba. The Rashba talks about a case that they abducted a girl, and they're going to raise her as a non-Jew, a Christian probably. So you want to know if you can do Mechal Shabbos to save the girl, or the time is of the essence. If you don't do something now, get the king's help, get Chosam Mitzad Malchus. If you don't take immediate action, the girl may be lost to us, may be lost to Judaism. So the Rashba talks about whether you can do different types of malachos, tchum, taraisas, drabanans. Can you do things to save the girl, save anybody else? The case was a girl. The Rashba's not sure. The Rashba says no. We don't do averas to save somebody else from doing averas, even though she's going to be lost for the rest of her life to Judaism. Hopefully Hashem will bring her back someday, but even though b'derech hateva, we're going to have to consider her as likely lost, still, we don't tell you to do even a minor avera, even isura zuta, we don't tell you to do it to save somebody from a major avera, and that's the ruling of the Rashba. Beis Yosef strongly disagrees. Beis Yosef says we have Tosfos. Tosfos says, first of all, he has one approach for a mitzvah rabbah, Peri Verivia. We do tell someone to do a minor avera. We do tell someone to do a minor avera in order to avoid the other person being mevatel or missing a major mitzvah or a major avera. Also, Tosfos says when it's not the person's fault, that when the person was low pasha, we do tell you to do a minor avera to stop him from doing a major avera. Both those cases are true here. Both those conditions are true here. He says, not the girl's fault. They abducted her, and certainly ein lecha mitzvah rabbah gadol mizeh to save her from losing her Judaism entirely. So certainly the Beis Yosef rules, that's what he rules in Shulchan Aruch, that you would be mechal Shabbos with an isura zuta to save her from being lost to Judaism for her entire life. That's the Shulchan Aruch rules, that it's a mitzvah to save her, even outside Gimel Parsos, which Tchumen are daraisa according to some poskim, and you have to do it, and Beis Din will force you to do it. Beis Din will bring the weight of its authority down to force you to do it. Mishnah Berurah says, but this is only when they abducted her ba'ones, when it's not her fault. That's why we say that both Terutzim of Tosfos apply, both Svaras of Tosfos apply. So you can do it. But if it's her fault, if she was the one who got herself into the mess in the first place, then when the poskim say no, then we go like the other approach of Tosfos, that is, as long if she was pasheya, then even if it's a mitzvah rabbah, it's not necessarily true that you can do an avera to save her from losing her whole Judaism, from doing averas her whole life. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Eli Rabba, from the poskim, that if the isra you have to do is only drabanan, then even if it is her fault, you can do an isra drabanan. Why? So in the Shartian he explains, because you have the other approach at Tosfos. One approach at Tosfos is that for a mitzvah rabbah, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If there's a mitzvah rabbah at stake, then fault is irrelevant. You can always save her. Even though the other approach at Tosfos, the Magen Avraham understands, the other approach at Tosfos is that we care only about whose fault it is. But once the isra is only midrabanan, then you can be somech on the sheet of Tosfos that when it's a mitzvah rabbah involved, we don't care about fault. The mitzvah deraisa you can do only if both Terutzim of Tosfos hold, only if it's not her fault, and it's a mitzvah rabbah. A mitzvah drabanan, an avera drabanan you can do if there's a mitzvah rabbah at stake for her, even if it is her fault. That's how the Mishnah Berurah paskins. Contemporary poskim, the Shevet HaLevi, the Lev Avram, discuss whether it's the right thing to do for someone to give up tefillah b'tzibur, maybe even parsha zachar, to go be makarev someone, to go to someone's parents or someplace where they don't have a minyan to help bring them to Torah and mitzvahs. Suppose can say on the one hand we have a rule that we say that we don't tell a person to sin, even a minor sin, for even to save people from major averos, even to bring them back to Judaism, certainly not if it's their fault. On the other hand, as we just saw, that if it's a mitzvah rabbah and you're only doing a mitzvah drabanan, there's more basis for leniency. Also, the Shevet HaLevi says that just bittul mitzvah, just not davening b'tzibur, you're not actually doing an avera, b'kum v'aseh, you're just being mevatel a mitzvah. More basis for leniency. So the poskim discuss whether that's an appropriate thing to do, to give up your own mitzvahs in order to bring somebody back from non-observance to observance. On Daf Hey, the Gemara again continues to discuss the questions of Hotzah. The Gemara brings a case where someone threw something from Rosh Hashanah, from a public domain, to Rosh Hashanah, to another public domain, to another spot in a public domain, and Rosh Hashanah be'emtza, there was a Rosh Hashanah in between. So Rebbe Shita is your chayev. Chum say pater, Rebbe says chayev. What's the chiyuv? Chayev shtayim, the Gemara explains. When the thing flew from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, that was one hotzah, from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. When it keeps on flying from the Rosh Hashanah to the Rosh Hashanah, that's a second hotzah. Well, one is hotzah, one is haknasa, so you're chayev twice. So the Gemara then brings, Rav and Shmuel say that Rebbe's shita of chiyuv is only if the Rosh Hashanah is roofed over, because then there's a svara that basic command demalia, when a Rosh Hashanah is roofed over, we say it's as if it's filled up, as if the thing landed. When it's not makura, when there's no roof, then there's no chiyuv. These halachas of chiyuv and pater may not be the most practical, but there is a tremendously critical application of this halacha. There is a tremendous chumrah of the Makar Chaim, Rav Yaakov Loberbaum, the author of the Nesivos and the Chavas Das. He has a tremendous chumrah in a little, very brief pamphlet he wrote on Erevin. He writes that when you make an Erev like we make it, with Tzuras HaPesach, with poles and wires and so on, he says the poles of the Tzuras HaPesach cannot be, he says, inside a house or even inside a fenced-off area, even inside a yard that has a fence. If you're not using that fence, if you're making your own Tzuras HaPesach that's going to cross over, you put one of the sticks of the Erev inside a fenced yard, then that's an invalid Erev. This is a tremendous problem. Sometimes even the Erev is built properly, then they put a construction fence around it, or someone puts up a fence that can pass the whole Erev according to the Makar Chaim. This is a huge debate in later poskim for the last century and a half, 2 centuries. Is this really a problem if one of the lechis, if one of the vertical poles of the Tzuras HaPesach Erev is inside a fenced-off area, does that invalidate the Erev? Makar Chaim's reason is, one of the reasons he gives at least, is that he says, Dovra Mukav Command Demalia Dummy. A fenced-off area, he uses the language of our Gemara, it's Command Demalia. As if it's filled up, so the lechi you put there, the vertical pole you put there, is as if it's not here. There's a tremendous debate about this Makar Chaim, whether we accept it or not. Some of the poskim ask, the Beis Shlomo says, what are you talking about? Basic command Mali says is Makuras, when there's a roof. The Gemara says, Rav and Shmuel said, when it's Makura, when it doesn't say if there's fences around it, if there's a roof, that's a problem. So putting the Tzuras HaPesach inside a house would be a problem. Going out through a window, going in through a window, into a house, that's a problem. The house has a roof. But just inside a fenced-off yard, what kind of problem is that? However, the Beis Shlomo says, doesn't matter. The minhag is, well, it matters, but he says the minhag is to be machmer like the Makar Chaim anyway, even though this reason of his, Makar Chaim has another reason, that the problem of Heker, the lechi is not distinct, but this reason at least, he says, is a very problematic reason, but the minhag is to be machmer anyway. Rav Shlomo Kluger, though, defends the Makar Chaim. He says the only time you need a roof is if you want to view the area above the walls as Command Demalia is filled up, then you have to have a roof. But the area within the walls, up to the height of the walls, that's Command Demalia, he says, even without a roof. And therefore he says that the lower part of the lechi, even if there's no roof, is always going to be Command Demalia, is always going to be halachically void, and a lechi that starts in midair is not valid. So poskim have other reasons for or against this Makar Chaim, but I'll call upon this Gemara is the basis for a great deal of discussion about this, for a very important discussion about this very practical chumrah of the Makar Chaim, not to put the vertical poles of a Tzuras HaPesach inside a fenced-off area. The Gemara also says, again, going back to the question of how to define the exact parameters of Hotzah, the Gemara says again on Daf Hey, the Gemara talks about if someone is carrying something, he has stuff in his pockets, he's carrying stuff, and he just walks in and out of a Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, he keeps going back and forth, he's not chayav unless he stops. And the Gemara goes further, the Gemara says it depends why he stops. If he stops lafush, if he stops to rest, that's like he stopped, and when he picks up again, that's a new hotzah, so then he's chayav each time it's a new hotzah, but if he doesn't stop at all, or if he stops lachatev to adjust the burden, that's like he didn't stop at all, and then he is pater because it's one long going back and forth, and as long as he ended up in the same rishus, he's not going to be chayav. Mishnah Berurah explains in a couple of places that the Gemara gives 2 examples. Lafush, which is to rest, that's like you stopped, and lachatev, which is to adjust the burden, it's like you didn't stop, that's part of the walking, you just stopped to fix the burden, that's like you didn't stop at all. Mishnah Berurah says, lafush is lav dafka, anything except to adjust the burden, any other reason that you stopped is considered that you stopped. Any reason that you stopped, for any reason that you couldn't walk, perhaps because it's a red light, you can't walk, the car's in the way. As long as it wasn't to adjust the burden, he says, any other reason that you stop is like lafush, and that creates a new part of the malacha of hutzah, unless you're doing it lachatef, and that's like you didn't stop at all. This is a question both chumrah and lakula. In the case of the Gemara, where you went in and out of Rishus Rabim to Rishus Yachah, and you ended up in the same Rishus, as long as you don't stop, then you haven't done a malacha deraisa at least. If you stop, it's a problem. So here, we're expanding the definition of what it means to stop. Stop for any reason is considered stopping, so that's a chumrah unless you stopped only to adjust the masa. However, the Mishnah Berurah talks about this in a case where it's the reverse, where it's a kula to have an expanded definition of stopping. The Mishnah Berurah talks about a case of someone who's going to carry pachas midal amas. Normally, Hatzah Daraisa is only if you carry 4 amas within a Rishus Harabim. Forget about going from Rishus Harabim to Rishus Yachid. If you're in Rishus Harabim and you go less than 4 amas, it's not a Malacha Daraisa. However, it's still awesome with Drabanan. In certain cases, we allow you, in certain cases of great need, we allow going less than 4 amas, but you have to stop every 4 amas. That way you're not doing Malacha Daraisa, you do repeated carryings of less than 4 amas. But again, you have to stop. So what's called stopping? If you stop lafush, that's called stopping. If you stop lachatev to adjust the masa, to adjust the burden, that's not called stopping. So here the Mishnah Berurah is making, and he says you stop for any other reason, even if your reason is just to satisfy this halacha and to avoid doing malacha deraisa, that's called stopping. Unless you stop to adjust the burden, Mishnah Berurah shita is that's called stopping. He actually brings machmirim. He actually says some people say you have to sit down or put down the item, but just stopping in a pro forma way doesn't count. But the Mishnah Berurah's inclination is, like he says in another place, also in the Sha'ar Tziyun, that stopping for any reason is considered stopping unless you stop just to adjust the masa. Gemara on Daf Vav, the Gemara says there are 4 reshuyos for Shabbos, one of the most famous brises in Masechah Shabbos. The Gemara says there are 4 types of reshuyos: Rishus Harabim, public domain; Rishus Yachid, private domain; Makom Ptur, a place where there's no hutzah at all, not Midrash or Midrabanan, not within it, not going from Rishus Harabim to it, or vice versa; and then Carmelis, which is a place that there is hutzah drabanan 4 amas within it, or going from Rishus Harabim to a Carmelis, or from Carmelis to Rishus Harabim, or from Rishus Yachid to Carmelis, or from Carmelis to Rishus Yachid. Those are the 4 reshuyos of Shabbos. The Gemara says, what are these 4 reshuyos? The Gemara gives examples. Rishus Harabim is Stratia and Platia. It's difficult to know exactly what those are. There's some kinds of public squares or roads, different types of roads. The Gemara says, what is Carmelis? The Carmelis itself, a bika, a valley, a field, it's a place that's not heavily traveled. Other examples. The Gemara says, what is a Makom Ptur? Makom Ptur is some place that is small and is not 4 tefachim wide. And those are the 4 reshuyos of Shabbos. Later on in Beis, the Gemara says, what about Midbar? The Gemara finds a brisa that a Midbar, a wilderness, is also considered a Rishus Harabim. So that would be another example of Rishus Harabim. So the Gemara says, Lo Kasha Abaya says, depends. Bisman Yisrael Shruim b'Midbar, when the Jews were in the desert in the time of the Exodus, then it has one din. Bisman Hazeh, in contemporary times, Midbar has a different din. In one case it's a Rishus Harabim, in one case it is not a Rishus Harabim. When is it a Rishus Harabim, when is it not a Rishus Harabim? So Rashi says, when the Jews were in the desert, then it was Rishus Harabim, because there were 600,000 or millions of Jews traveling through. Bisman Hazeh, a Midbar is a Midbar, it's a wilderness, it's not heavily trafficked. At that point, it is not a Rishus Harabim. Tosfos incidentally says that the implication is that to be a Rishus Harabim, you have to have mashmak tas, slight implication. You have to have 600,000 people, like the number of male Jews of a certain age in the desert. That's a tremendous machlokas. We'll hopefully discuss this as we go through Masechah Shabbos. But this is the sheet of Rashi and the Bahag. Tosfos brings different opinions about this. That some say that it has to be mamish exactly like the Midbar. You have to have 600,000 people or millions of people to be considered a Rishus Harabim. Other Rishonim disagree, and they say as long as it's a public and travel place, it is a Rishus Harabim. Now the Rambam explains the Gemara the opposite of Rashi. That's how the Achronim understand the Rambam. Rashi says that Midbar Bisman Hazeh in contemporary times is not a Rishus Harabim. In the time of the Jews, in the time of the Exodus, it was a Rishus Harabim. Rambam says Midbar. The Rambam just writes Midbar is Rishus Harabim. That's all he says. Maggid Mishnah is Makmi on the Rambam. The Gemara says only when the Jews were in the desert. So the Kesef Mishnah brings from Rabbi Avram ben Rambam, Rambam's own son. He understood the Gemara the opposite. That today, where there are no Jews in any one particular place in the desert, the entire Midbar is public access. People travel through all the time, even if it's not Grand Central Station, but it's trafficked enough to be Rishus Harabim. In the time of the Jews in the desert, all the Jews were in one spot, and the rest of the Midbar was empty. Then it was not a Rishus Harabim. But a modern Midbar, the Rambam says, is a Rishus Harabim. Poskim point out that the Rambam seems to understand, certainly not like Rashi, he doesn't say anything about 600,000. The Midbar today has nowhere near 600,000. Nevertheless, the Midbar is a Rishus Harabim. Rav Asher Weiss brings from the Merkavas and Mishnah, he goes even further and says the Rambam implies that not only don't you need 600,000, you don't need any real number. The Achronim debate for the last couple of centuries, the Achronim have debated, if you don't need 600,000, is there any minimum level of traffic that you need? The Rambam implies no. The Rambam implies even a modern desert is a Rishus Harabim. As long as it's public and open and some people travel there, you don't have a rigid concentration of all the Jews in one spot. As long as there's some traffic through the desert, even if there's no Rabbim, there's no multitude in any sense of the word, it doesn't matter as long as the nature of the place is it is travelable, it is traversable, and it's public. That's enough to be a Rishus Harabim, according to the Shita of the Rambam. And the truth is, many Rishonim have trouble with Rashi. They say Rashi needs 600,000, but our Gemara is mashma that the Midbar B'zman Hazeh is not a Rishus Harabim because nobody travels there. Rashi himself, the language of Rashi when he explains why a Midbar B'zman Hazeh is not a Rishus Harabim, so Rashi says, Holchem and Baris lo shchichi. People don't travel in the desert. The implication is an ordinary road where travel is common is Rishus Harabim, despite the fact that very few roads, if any, have 600,000 people in one day. So some Rishonim disagree with Rashi. Other Rishonim say, the Biur Halacha brings, other Rishonim say that even Rashi agrees that intercity roads that connect cities, can be Rishus Harabim even without 600,000. Rashi means inside a city, then you need 600,000. But roads that connect the cities, they can be Rishus Harabim even if they don't have 600,000. Biur Halacha brings this. Biur Halacha brings that even though the minhag is like Rashi, many Achronim say the minhag is like Rashi, that we don't have a Rishus Harabim unless you have 600,000. There are implications for Erevin. The kind of Erevin we make are typically only valid if the large Erevin are typically only valid the way they're made if there's no Rishus Harabim. So the Mishnah Berurah says the minhag is to be lenient like Rashi. Most of our modern municipal Erevin are based on being lenient like Rashi. However, he says other Rishonim disagree, and even Rashi says, some Rishonim, the Ramban, Ran say, even Rashi would agree that a road between two cities can be a Rishus Harabim even without 600,000 people traveling on it. Similarly, the Yeshuas Malcha says the same thing. Many disagree with Rashi entirely, he says, and even though the minhag is like Rashi, certainly once you have the Ramban, when you have a street between two cities, they say even Rashi and the Bahag would agree, certainly a person should be machmer, we have to be machmer, that such a road is considered Rishus Harabim with the various stringencies of Rishus Harabim, even according to the opinion of Rashi, that a city itself is not considered Rishus Harabim unless it has 600,000 people inside it.